Okay, hello everybody. Today we're going to be installing the RogueWorx Zenith kit, which is a kit to solve the lower receiver cracking problem which has plagued the GHK G5 for many years. The kit is made up of several parts. We have this main insert which goes inside the gun and has a sorbo pad attached to it. We have a new buffer plate which goes also inside the gun on the end of the recoil rod. We have the receiver cap which goes on the outside of the gun just here. That has a hole through it which has a bolt that goes through into the main insert inside the gun here. The receiver cap comes in several versions. This one has a QD socket. We also do a version which has a sling loop, and they're both in black, and then we do the same two parts in the tan colour for people that have got the tan version of the GHK G5. So we're going to be installing the QD socket version today. There's also several small parts which come in a little baggie. We have the blued stainless steel main body bolt, which are custom made for this kit. That is required to hold the gun closed because the main insert uses up the body pin that normally holds the gun closed. We have a little wedge piece which slots into the hole that we're going to drill through the back of the lower receiver, and we have the lock bar which helps attach the receiver cap to the gun. It sits in the rail on top of the gun up here, and you can see that the two holes in the lock bar line up with the two screws that are on the receiver cap. Right, so first thing we're going to have to do is disassemble the gun down to the parts we need. So I'm going to move the stuff out of the way. Remove the mag, safe the gun. Then you're going to need a flathead screwdriver. I've got an electric one, and you're going to need a punch, so another screwdriver will do. And we're going to use the punch to push out this rear body pin here. It's supposed to stop, but I accidentally pushed it all the way out past the detent. And we're going to open it up, and then we're going to get the electric screwdriver, and we're just going to unscrew the front body pin as well. Obviously you don't want to lose these, so put them to one side, or if you've got a magnetic dish or something. Then I'm going to use a punch, or you could use a screwdriver as well, and we're just going to tap the front body pin out of the gun too. Probably being a bit overkill with that hammer there. Pull the pin out, put it to one side, then we're going to separate the upper and lower. That gives you the two halves of the gun. And we're just going to slide the bolted carrier out as well. Put that to one side, we're not working on that yet. And here's the two halves that we're going to work on first. Right, so we're going to be working on the lower receiver first. If you happen to push the body pin all the way out like I did in the previous step, I'm just going to show you how to pop it back in. There is a spring and detent that goes under it that you're going to have to push back down. And it should just hold the pin on the end detent. It will click into place like that. So now with that pin in the out position, we're going to take the main insert and just firmly seat it down into the gun. It's going to be quite snug, you're going to have to push it all the way down, and then we just push the body pin across. And it should get a nice satisfying click as it locks into place. And that's it for installing the main insert. Now, if you struggle to get this pin to go across, you might have to use a soft implement to add a bit of encouragement. And that's it. Okay, now that we've installed the main insert into the lower half, we're going to start work on the upper half of the gun, on the upper receiver, and we're going to be removing this body locking lug, which is the first permanent modification, and that is because the main insert occupies the space and the body pin where that locking lug used to go. So we're going to need a very sharp knife for this, preferably a Stanley knife with a new blade, or a very sharp craft knife, and we're going to be scoring along these two lines either side of the body lug. This is very easy to do. Just get the knife and let it naturally follow along the mould lines. Be careful not to cut yourself, especially if it's a new blade in your Stanley. And we're not trying to press too hard, just keep running the knife over these two lines over and over again. I think I've sped the video up a bit here. I think it took me about 10 minutes in total. And just keep running the knife over it again, and you want to do both sides. and just score them so that eventually we can push the knife through once the material is thin enough. You only need to push through on one side, as you'll see here. If you've scored both of them, eventually you can force the knife through, and that's separated there, and then you can just fold it over and the other side will snap off. Okay, and that's it, that's the body lug removed. Okay, now that we've removed that main body lug, we don't need that anymore. And the problem we've got now is where we've just cut that off is quite sharp, and you'll see if you offer it up to the lower receiver, it interferes with the sorbo pad on the main insert. So what we're going to do is get our knife and we're going to start trimming these corners back where we've just cut that body lug off. So obviously you could use a Dremel or something for this, but I'm just showing you that you can do it with the same Stanley knife that you just cut them off. So we've trimmed them off so they're not square anymore, and you can see it still interferes a little bit with the main insert. So if I just show you how far you've got to cut these back, you want to go almost to the middle of that little indent on the upper receiver there. So you can just cut down to the level of the plastic with your knife again, and then cut across to shave it off. Again, be careful not to cut yourself. The plastic is quite tough, so you can see how far I've cut there. And we do the other side as well. Just cut down to the level that you want, and then skim across to meet the cut you just made. Try and shave it so it's nice and smooth with the knife. And we just want to remove those sharp corners again, same as we did with the first cut. And it should leave us with two nicely angled cuts that will clear the sorbo pad on the main insert when you're all finished. Just like that. And now, after you've finished cutting, it's a good idea to get a small needle file and just take off all those sharp edges that we've just been cutting with the knife, just to make it a bit more user friendly and to reduce the chance of those sharp edges catching on the sorbo pad as well. You should be able to run your thumb over them and feel nice and smooth. If we offer it up to the lower here, you can see that closes with no problems at all. Excellent. Okay, next thing we're going to be doing is installing the receiver cap onto your upper receiver. Now for this you need the lock bar from your small parts bag, which is the little thing with two holes in. That just slots into the first slot at the back of your rail up here. Make sure you don't lose it. You can secure it with a bit of blue tack if you like. And then you just get the receiver cap and you wiggle it onto the back of the receiver. It is a tight fit. You're best off going side to side and just squeeze it on there. You'll see when it's on because the screws line up with those two small holes. Then you just need a 2mm Allen key. I've got a 2mm bit and a screwdriver here, but you can see I've also got a 2mm screwdriver as well. And just screw them down. They've already got blue Loctite on, so you're not going to worry about them coming undone. Screw them down. They don't need to be crazy tight. It is only M3. I don't want you stripping the threads. And that is it. That is on. That cap will now not come off. It's locked into the lock bar in the rail. And that's your upper finished. Okay, now that we've finished with the upper receiver, we're going to move on to one of the harder parts of this install, which is drilling the hole for this bolt to go through the receiver cap and into the threads of the main insert. Now, we've got to drill that through the middle of this little square on the back of the lower receiver. And that hole is going to be where the other parts in our small bits bag go, which is the wedge and the blued steel bolt. So to mark that hole properly before we drill it, we're going to put the two receiver halves back together with the receiver cap on, close it down, fold the stock, and gripping the two together tightly so that the receiver cap is in its proper place. I'm going to use a scribe here, though you could use a Sharpie as well. I'm just going to go in that hole and go round a few times, and it should leave a nice little mark on the plastic, which will show us where we've got to drill. Now on most G5s there's a mould line down the middle of that square so you can see where the centre is, and then just put a dot in the middle of the circle, and that is going to be the point at which you're going to drill. Now obviously you don't want to be drilling through this whilst your main insert is still in, so I'm going to show you the trick for pulling the main insert back out because it can be stuck in there quite stiff. So pop your body pin out, and then I'm going to take the screw, the blued steel screw, and put it in backwards from the other side in the main receiver. And then you just hook your finger on it and pull, and away it comes. Okay, we're going to drill the actual hole now, so you need yourself a drill, a 6mm drill bit, something to pilot hole it with. I've got a 3mm in this case, so we're going to drill through the dot we just made with a 3mm drill bit and then widen it out to the 6mm afterwards. You can see I'm being very naughty here by freehanding this one for the first take of this video, but it worked out perfectly fine anyway. For the small hole, you're only going through a few millimeters of plastic. So what I should have actually done is what I'm showing in this clip, where I hook the receiver onto a piece of wood on a solid surface and go directly from above so that I've got something solid to push against. Just drill through it. And now we're going to move on to widening the hole out to 6mm, and you'll probably completely screw it up like I've done here because this glass fibre plastic really likes to bite these large drill bits. So what I should have done here is, instead of going straight from a 3mm pilot hole to the 6mm drill bit and taking out huge chunks of plastic with a larger bit, I should have gone through several smaller drill bits to take out incrementally larger bits of plastic where the drill bit would not bite into it and try and pull the stock up as much. So I highly recommend you go like 3mm, 4mm, 5mm, 5.5, and then 6mm finally, just to work your way up and make it a bit more manageable. Totally professional. Definitely did that on the first take. And once you've finished, clean it up, and there's your 6mm hole good to go. Okay, what we're going to be doing next is installing the small wedge piece in the hole that we just drilled. Now, if you drilled the hole in exactly the right spot, when you've got your stock open like that, your wedge should be able to fit in that hole nice and snug, and it'll sit above the stock like that. You won't have any problems getting it in. Now if you've got that, then congratulations, you're a genius. You can just run some super glue around that collar, around there, and then with the stock open, you can just squish it into that hole, be nice and snug, and you can just leave it like that, with the stock keeping it square, to dry for a couple of hours. However, if you're a normal person and you didn't manage to drill the hole in exactly the right spot, then you might find that the wedge is sitting a little bit low on the tab, for example, and when you try and open the stock, it'll actually hit the wedge and you'll have a bit of an obstruction problem there. Now, don't panic, it's not the end of the world. What we can do is move the hole a little bit using either like a needle file, or you can take your drill again and just run it in the hole and kind of work it back and forth to move the hole in the direction it needs to go. A needle file is obviously the safer option. Now, once you've done that, you should be able to fit the wedge in the hole and it'll sit on top of the stock like that. But obviously your hole is now quite loose, so we can't just stick it in place with super glue because the super glue won't fill the gap. So we're going to use epoxy instead. I highly recommend the steel type epoxy, otherwise known as JB Weld, because it will be nice and strong. It's going to fill the gap around the collar for you. I'm just going to mix them up here. I'm going to use a snipped off Q-tip. I'm just going to apply it around the collar. You can be quite liberal with this because it's easy to clean up afterwards. We want it to smush in and fill the gaps. And stick it in the hole there, pop the stock open. And we're going to cut the glue bit off the Q-tip and just going to use that to clean through the hole as well. Make sure there's no epoxy or JB Weld stuck in the hole because that would block the body bolt from going through there, make a big mess afterwards. So wipe off any excess that you can see now. Leave the stock in the open position like that to hold the piece square. And what we're going to do next is put the upper back on to brace this whilst it dries. Right, so we're going to put everything back together for the first time so that we can get the body bolt through and brace the wedge that we just installed while the glue dries for a couple of hours. So we're going to slot the main insert in how we did before. You're going to get your upper receiver back on, get the pin through. folded down, and just for easy access we're going to fold the stock, and we're going to get the blued stainless steel body screw from your small parts bag, and it's going to be a 3mm Allen key, and just screw that in there. Doesn't need to be overly tight. Open the stock again to hold the wedge in place and just leave it like that for a couple of hours. That's your first assembly. Right, while the glue is drying on the rest of the gun, we're going to move on to installing the final component, which is the shiny new buffer plate. So you're going to need a block of wood, a punch like a 2mm or a 1.5 to knock the pin out of your existing buffer plate. You're going to need a hammer, and some of these nice parallel grips would also be very handy if you've got them. So first thing we're going to do is unscrew the recoil rod from the bolt assembly. No! Yeah, watch out for that. So recover your dignity, and we're going to move straight on to knocking the pin out of your existing buffer plate. It's only plastic, so it should be quite easy. Once you've done that, pull the existing buffer plate off, and we're going to put that somewhere safe. Now get yourself a 2mm drill bit and just use it to clean out any burrs or swarf that are in your recoil rod that might cause a problem for pushing the pin in a minute. And then you can get your nice buffer plate. Yours might look slightly different as is as a prototype. You will probably have to tap your recoil rod into your buffer plate with a hammer, whereas mine just pushed in this clip. So just tap yours in, and the rod and yours should end flush with that steel collar. And then if you've got the nice parallel grips, you can now use it to just squish the hardened steel pin through your recoil rod and into position in the buffer plate. These make that job a hell of a lot easier, though this isn't the only way you can do it. You can also do this with a vise if you've got one, or you can put it on the edge of a bench or something solid and just tap it in with a hammer, or bash it in with a rock if you feel like it. If you're worried that that pin might be a little bit loose, then you can put some super glue on there just to hold it in place, but in our experience they've all been a push fit. You do not have to worry about it coming out. And just a final note to make sure that you put the plate on the right way round. The RW logo should be facing towards the back of the gun, with the rubber impact pad facing towards the bolt carrier. So now we can screw this rod back onto the main bolt assembly. Right, for reassembling the recoil rod back onto your bolt assembly, you're going to need some Loctite. This is Loctite 248 or blue Loctite, which is in like a glue stick format. If you haven't got any Loctite, then you can also use a little bit of super glue, and it is just to glue this screw back on the end of the recoil rod, as this one does have a habit of working loose over time. It does have a spring washer that goes on it. Right, so we're going to slide the spring onto the rod, and we're going to hold the spring down, and then there's a little collar that goes on, and then you slide the bolt carrier itself onto the rod, holding that all down as well, and then get the screw and the spring washer in place, which you've already applied adhesive to, and then holding the buffer plate at the end to stop it from twisting. You can use the Phillips head screwdriver to tighten that up nice and tight. And that's the bolt assembly all done, ready to go back into the gun. Okay guys, congratulations if you've made it this far. It is finally time for the final assembly, so get yourself a 3mm Allen key, your bolt assembly, and the glue should be all dry on your gun by now, so it's safe to take out the main body bolt. Put that to one side, and we're going to open the gun up. And we're going to want to slot the bolt assembly back in. Now it is a bit of a squeeze. The bolt carrier will fit under the receiver cap. You just have to put it at a bit of an angle like this and kind of wiggle it. It will squeeze underneath. And same for the buffer plate. You just have to kind of hook it underneath and push it under. It will fit. So now that the glue's dried, we're going to take a little opportunity to do a bit of cleanup here around this wedge that we've attached with a needle file. Now we intentionally didn't anodize this part because some people have to sand it very lightly with the needle file just to take off any of the sharp corners, depending on the casting tolerances of your particular G5. So you can use a needle file to just clean off any excess epoxy that's dried on and take off the sharp edges of the wedge, just to make it a bit easier to open and close the gun. Okay, the next little job to do in this final reassembly is to get your silicone grease and apply a very small amount of it just to the face of the sorbo pad on the main insert. The reason for this is the metal buffer plate in the upper has to slide against this pad whenever you're opening and closing the gun, so you don't want it to grip too tightly, otherwise you might struggle to actually get your gun open and closed again. So just spread out a small amount and you're good to go. And this is it, it's finally time to close the gun for the final time. So get that buffer plate in place and you're going to bring your upper down, pause and use your finger just to poke the plate so it goes in front of the sorbo and then snap it shut. Now you can fold your stock, get your blued steel body screw, get your 3mm Allen key, and we're going to screw that baby in there for the final time. And that is it. Your Zenith kit is all done. And if you were wondering what sort of level of confidence we've got of this new kit, here is a mag fully loaded with CO2 thanks to the Devil Hunter mod. Yeah, this thing's frickin' indestructible now. Enjoy.